So this video is intended to be an impressions video of Rogue Trader, and I know I'm a little late to the game. You see, I waited about a year before even touching this game. And because of that, I need to offer a little bit of a backstory as to why I held off for so long, as to why I was hesitant, before actually talking about my impressions of the game. So I originally bought Rogue Trader for the sole and explicit reason so as to support Owlcat. I would say these days, Owlcat is probably my preferred studio. I like all the games they put out so far, and I like their work ethic and how they interact with their customers, and so I thought, you know what, I'll support them. I'm not terribly interested in Warhammer 40K, but I want to support their work. And so I sat on the game for a long time, thinking to myself, I'll eventually play the game, why not? I'll wait for all the DLC to have come out and for everything to be patched up and what have you. And that was the original plan. But then the recent DLC came out, and a lot of people were putting out videos saying, you should try it out, and I decided I might as well give it a go. But the further backstory is a little bit more complicated, because I've wrestled for many years with the idea of getting into Warhammer 40K. It's grimdark, and generally speaking, I'm not a fan of the genre of grimdark. I kind of see real life as grimdark, so I don't necessarily want to engage in escapism that involves replicating real life, even though it's not a perfect analog, but you get my point. But one thing I've learned is you need to give things a try, and what you really need is an entry point. Sometimes when a setting or a universe is not particularly appealing to you, you need to wait for the right point of entry before really fully exploring it. And hitherto it's been the case that most 40K games have been shooter games, tactical games involving pure combat, this sort of thing. And Rogue Trader is, we know, authentically the first proper CRPG set in the Warhammer 40K universe. So if I was going to give 40K a proper go, it had to be in the form of a CRPG. And I am, hand over heart, through and through a fantasy guy. So I've spent the past 40 years off and on engaged with D&D and various derivations of D&D. Basically fantasy, high fantasy, low fantasy, anything involving fantasy. I like science fiction, but not as much as fantasy. And science fiction really needs to push the right buttons to awaken my interest. So I decided, okay, I'm going to dive into Rogue Trader. And I did. And I have to say at the outset, whilst I'm not a convert now to the 40K universe, in the sense that I'm obsessed with it, and it's my primary MO or the setting or genre that I like the most, I have warmed up to it significantly. In the sense that I used to dislike a lot of things about it. The fact that it's grim dark, the obsessive cult of humanity, i.e. obsessive cult of the God Emperor, its overall goofiness, and the fake Latin, for example, which annoys me as somebody with a background in classics. And in general, I just thought, it's a goofy setting, and I sort of get why people are into it, but I sort of don't. I think I've changed my mind quite a bit on that, through Rogue Trader. I think it's a universe with a lot of lore, a lot of depth. Yes, I'm still not a fan of the goofy cult of the Emperor, but in some sense, I've come to embrace the goofiness of Warhammer 40K as an essential part of the universe. It's meant to be goofy, it's meant to be even humorous. And once I did that, vis-a-vis the help of Rogue Trader, I really came to appreciate many of the elements. So with that said, as I said before, I am not a full convert to Warhammer 40K, but I find it more enjoyable, more interesting now, and I can appreciate it better now than I did previously, because Rogue Trader has done such an exceptionally good job as an ambassador, as it were, of the setting, and it opened up the way for me. And having said that, let me give you my impressions thus far of the game. As I suggested before, I think that Owlcat has done an outstanding job of conveying the feel and the atmosphere of Warhammer 40K. The music is possibly the best thing about the game. It is spot on. It gives you that sense of grim, dark. It's heavy, ponderous, ominous at times. And it really infuses the game with what you would expect to be basically Warhammer 40K music. The music is absolutely perfect for the setting. And another thing I have to note, even though I prefer Wrath of the Righteous because I'm a Pathfinder, D&D, fantasy type of guy, I have to say that with each game Owlcat makes, they improve upon their skills, they improve upon the implementation of their vision, and I have to say, overall, from a technical standpoint, in terms of all the details, in terms of the implementation, in terms of just the breathtaking amount of text you have to read through, and sometimes it's a novel, because compared to the Pathfinder games, there's a lot to read and take in when it comes to Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader. They've just done the setting justice, I can say. I'm not an expert, obviously. I've read a fair bit about 40K over the years, and then upon playing Rogue Trader, I read even more. And they really, really just nailed the ambiance of 40K. The little details of the ship, the dialogues, the companions are, I would argue, much more complex. They have a lot more going for them compared to Pathfinder companions, and I say that with some sadness because, again, I'm a fantasy Pathfinder type of guy, but the details of their quests, how they fit into the universe itself, it just seems more refined compared to the Pathfinder games. And to some degree, that's to be expected, since Owlcat is improving, they're advancing their skills, and they're becoming a better game developer over time. So in terms of music, in terms of art, in terms of exposition, in terms of ambiance, atmosphere, Owlcat has nailed 40K really well, and I think this game can, for many people, serve as an ambassador to the setting as it has for me. Even though I had read some stuff in the past, this really solidified a greater interest in the setting, even if I am not a full-blown convert to the God Emperor, so to speak. In terms of the combat, it's purely turn-based, as many of you know, and in contrast to what a lot of people have claimed, I find the technicalities of this game a lot more difficult to understand and master compared to Pathfinder. Now, part of this is obviously that I have a long and extensive background in D&D and its various derivatives, so understanding the rules of Pathfinder games was fairly easy for me just because I had accumulated this experience and I had played a lot of D&D and Pathfinder to some degree as well. But I've never played tabletop Warhammer 40K in any capacity, so I'm still learning the ropes. I'm playing on hard. I think that's the entire playthrough I'm going to do this first time, which is significantly easier, I have to say, than the hard of Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous, or Kingmaker. I have alternated between unfair and hard in the Pathfinder series, but as a noob and Rogue Trader, I decided I'm not going to dive into unfair right away, so I am sticking with hard. And overall, it's not too bad. I still don't have complete mastery of the mechanics. I'm trying to improve and understand everything, and it's taking time. But fortunately, even on hard, you're not really punished for not having perfect builds or what have you, and I've decided to run with the Iconoclast disposition. In part because I have a personal aversion to the cult of the God Emperor. I'm really not a fan of dogmatism in general, and so I thought, if I'm going to do at least one run, let me choose something that I find personally appealing, and Iconoclast seems to be that. Although, having played now about 50 to 60 hours of the game, I think I will do a total of 3 runs, one for each disposition. And I'm enjoying it so far. I am going with a Pyromancer Sanctified Psyker. It's pretty fun, and I've decided to just see how it goes. I've used some online guides, but I'm mostly building it the way I see fit. And I've decided to take companions with me that seem to fit the Iconoclast nature and disposition. And as I said before, the companions are just much more thorough than the previous companions from Pathfinder games. They seem much more in sync with the setting in terms of their personal quests and what's going on. And it's very noticeable that they're just sort of overall more fully formed than previous companions in the Pathfinder games. Even though I prefer those games, it's just a natural evolution, I think, at the end of the day. And I'm even kind of interested in one of the romances in the game. Shockingly, because normally I have zero interest in romance. I might do a romance, but it's not a big deal to me. But surprisingly, I've taken quite a bit to none other than the companion called Earlit or Earleet, who is an Eldar, basically a space elf, and specifically she is a Craftworld Eldari or Asuryani, and one of the reasons why I find her so interesting, and the romance as a consequence interesting, is the tension between the history of our own people and the fact that they were responsible for the creation of Slaanesh, the evil chaos goddess of, well, temptation, pleasures of the flesh, passion, and a lot of destructive emotions in general, and the fact that you are trying to navigate that and understand what's going on with her, because part of the premise of the survival, specifically of the craft world Eldari, is that they survive the way they do because of an iron discipline and the fact that they do not yield to their passions in the same way that the Drukhari do. In fact, the Drukhari are basically the Eldar as they existed just prior to the creation of Slaanesh. And I find that tension really interesting, and I'm looking forward to see how this romance is ultimately resolved. I initially started with Cassia, who's more of a standard type of romance, very chivalrous, that sort of thing, but I found it much less interesting than the romance with Irlit. So I'm in Act 2 right now, getting towards the end, and I am enjoying the game pretty thoroughly. I don't know where I would place it in terms of all-time highs, top 20, top 10, whatever. I have to finish the game, and I probably need to do 2 other runs eventually. And I would like to put out a full review down the line, although that's going to take quite some time, just for the sake of it. But I'm enjoying it. I think Owlcat did a fantastic job of bringing this world, this setting, this universe to life in 40K. I don't know if any other developer could have done it the way they did, but they really nailed it overall. If I had any complaints, it would probably be about the combat. I'm not a huge fan of how it flows, but it's pretty fun at times, and it's okay. But so far I enjoy the story the most, and how everything's unfolding, your many different interactions. There's so much to read, so much to know. So I would say this is an excellent game so far. Its comprehensiveness is really the thing that wins me over at the end of the day. Not anything specific, but all the details that have gone into crafting this universe. Owlcat was very, very devoted to that, and it shows. And I'm looking forward to finishing the game, eventually, hopefully sooner than later. I want to finish my first run before Dragon Age The Veilguard comes out, but we'll see. Anyway, if you've had a similar experience with Rogue Trader or Warhammer 40K, do let me know. Let me know what you think in general of the game or of the 40K universe. And as always, if you like my videos or my takes, you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. Really helps out the channel. It's much appreciated. Until the next time, check you out then. Take care.